This week's episode is sponsored by Gratitude Apparel Clothing. You can find all the information within the description. Give them a follow. Thank you. Hello everybody, welcome to the Billy Moore podcast, and today's special guest is none other than Dire Straits, the original drummer from Dire Straits, former Dire Straits drummer, should I say, Pick Withers. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks, Billy.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself before we begin.
Well, I was grew up in Leicester, very long time ago. You have to guess how many years, but I was a baby boomer, and I think really that's where everything starts. It puts me at an age of like 13 when the Beatles happened. And the Beatles changed everything musically for me, because I ended up going to, although I've been playing in bands, and the Beatles weren't really on the radar initially. It was the Shadows that started me off.
That Cliff Richard?
No, not Cliff. The Shadows.
How was that? Different.
Really good. We'll not go there.
Yeah.
It's a really good band with a guitar, rhythm guitar, bass, and there was always a drum solo on their LPs, and it was They were basically an instrumental band that backed Cliff Richard. So if you're an instrumental band, you have to be reasonably, if not really, good at your instrument. Otherwise, you get found out, because it's just instrumentals you're playing. So it's instrumental music. So I was playing in bands, and the Beatles kind of just broke down all the doors and changed all the rules. And I'd left school, and I was working for Leicester City Council, office boy really, but I was in 3 different offices and already playing in bands. And the band I was in, we decided to have an audition in London to see if we could go to Germany. And that was amazing, because I was about 17. I was underage really. It's pre the European Union, so you had to have a work permit. And I wasn't old enough to get one, so I just went on a holiday passport and looked like a hitchhiker to get through the border. And I got through the border, and they didn't, because their papers.
Yeah.
They weren't in order, but it came good in the end. We went to Hamburg. First night, cried my eyes out. Just the accommodation was just very frugal, just a bare bed.
Is that the first place you'd went to, like from the UK, Germany?
We travelled in a van.
Yeah, and that was the first experience of going abroad.
It was my first experience of being abroad. Yeah,
same,
really,
same, yeah.
Because it was well before cheap flights to the sunshine. It was just we went on a ferry through France, Germany. The border must have been. I think the border might have been with Holland. I'm not sure. Can't quite figure. Maybe we went to The Hague or Rotterdam or something. I'm not quite sure. Harwich in a Ford Thames van. I remember this group was called the Berkeley Squares, and for me, they were what might be arguably called the second best band in Leicester. The unquestionably best band was a group called James King and the Freeners, who metamorphosed into the Family.
Yeah,
group called Family. They were undoubtedly the best band, but we were probably the second best band. And off we went to Germany. We went. I think it was about 60, 65, 64 even, maybe 64. 60, but maybe it was 65, because I would have been 17. So we went with 30 songs, and we played in some places that just, I mean, now with the internet, people go, well, I know what that is. But we played in these places, I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
Hostesses with the mostesses and things, and kind of guys that were bouncers, that had really big necks, like Uwe Seeler. Uwe Seeler was a great German centre forward, and he had a neck like
the built like Hardy, them Germans back in the day, like.
And his job was basically a bouncer, troubleshooter. I think he gambled for the boss. And one night, we played with another band, a Scottish band called the Big Six, who I have really fond memories of. They looked after me, really, because I was like a baby, really. Yeah. I mean, I was 17, but I think I was about 13 in what I knew about them. I knew nothing.
Not of the world.
I'm not of the world at all, you know. And we played. The club was open from 8 o'clock in the evening till 4 o'clock in the morning. So you played to make it kind of fair. The two bands overlapped. If you played at 8 o'clock one night, you finished at 8:45. The next band would play 9 to 9:45, and you would just go over each other. Then the next night we'd change it. So each night you would be either on first or on last. So you would do 8 o'clock, and if you did 8 o'clock, you finished at 2 till 3. And if you played at 9 o'clock, you did 3 till 4 at the end all the time.
Yeah.
And we agreed to, because it was kind of tedious changing. We'd all use the same gear, and with the drums we'd just change a couple of things, so it wasn't a big to do to change everything. And one night I was changing the cymbals, and they were playing some. I think it was at the end of the evening actually, and I was taking the cymbals off so that he could put his cymbals on the next evening, and mine would be already out of the way. And I see him having this conversation with the music going. It was mime to me. I couldn't hear it. Having a conversation with this lady of the night. I just thought it was a lady.
It was a brass.
and there was money coming out. It was all in mime, right?
Yeah.
She had a tough night. And, the money came out, and he looked at it theatrically and just tutted and didn't think it was quite what it should be. And she beseechingly said, "That's it." And then he, I think, a little slap. Or maybe it was a big slap, I don't know. But then more money came out. And then another night, when I was actually the last guy, he was brushing up, and there was a guy that was drunk there, completely out on the table. And he was just sweeping up, and he was doing a quick shifty. He came in, Rouse, out, picked the guy up, he said, bang, on the table. Bit more sweeping, bit more reconnaissance. And I'm just taking the cymbals off really slowly, watching. And then finally, after about 2 or 3 visits, he just basically goes in, picks him up, frisks him, takes his watch and his wallet, and throws him John Wayne style out onto the street. It's a place called Lübeck, which is like a little fishing port. And I was terrified of him. Just tiptoe around the periphery of Ule, But so there's all that sort of stuff going on. And if you met another band, either if they'd be Scottish, English, Irish, whatever, you would do, you would do fly the flag. You would just basically spend as much time together, just, Brits abroad, whatever it is.
Sharing experiences as well.
If you were looking, I remember we played in Cologne, and this, we had quite a long journey, and the band that was vacating the gig, in order for us to play there, they didn't have so far to travel. So when we arrived, they were just moving out, and we exchanged, notes. And they said, on a Tuesday evening, as a guy comes in, he will ask you to play Wooly Bully. Sam Sham and the Pharaohs, Wooly Bully. Spielen Wooly Bully. You must say, no, nein, nicht können, Wooly Bully. And he go, no, spielen Wooly Bully. Nicht können. And then he would go, 5 beer, spielen Wooly Bully. Dang, 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 dang. He said, see if you can, if it's a quiet night, see if you can beat our record. We played it 16 times consecutively, and we got 80 beers.
Yeah.
So sure enough, he came in. It was but it wasn't a very quiet night. Yeah. We did about 2 or 3 consecutive versions of Wooly Bully, so we got 15 beers. And then the proprietor said, you must play something else because you're driving all the other people away. There were little kind of cameos like that all the time. And then there was we played in Nuremberg, which, as we all know, was where the Nazi trials were. But I mean, I was 17, pushing 18. None of this registered with me at all. It was just like a gothic town to me, And it was like a hostess bar. Other people came, but it was like a little L-shaped room, and round the corner was the private, more pricey bar, but that's where the changing room was. And we played 6 hours, so we played 45 minutes on, 15 minutes off. And I walked around there to have a pee or something, and maybe have a wash, whatever. And you could see that there was this, a punter was talking to this hostess, but I just thought she was a girl that just danced there or something. and she made some kind of joke, and he dived into a cleavage like the Valley of Promises, and and she winked at the barman, who just went and poured all the champagne down the sink. I mean, she made sure he was pretty, completely distracted, and then he came up for
grafting everyone.
he came up for air,
Yeah.
and she went, noch einer, let's have another beer, another champagne, But of course, at the end of the evening, when the bill came, I think because this is, you must remember, folks, I'm purely a 17-year-old, innocent, naive little, I'm only putting all this together afterwards. I wasn't participating in these proceedings at all. I was
just an observer,
just playing. But, I think what would happen was that he would be thinking that paying the bill, he's walking out arm in arm with the girl, and she's going, no, that's not happening. So it was, it was kind of I think what helped about that whole experience was that when you get this kind of cross section of society, and you think of it, it's 1964, they've got clubs that are open until 4:00 in the morning. Yeah. And people in this country are going 10 to 11, ringing bells. Last orders, everybody get
different world over there.
You sometimes think we may have won the war, but we lost the peace or something, But to kind of entertain all these people, you had to have quite a broad. Yeah, you played the Beatles stuff because that's why you were there, but you also played lots of other stuff, and I thought it was a great experience for me. I had to grow up quickly. By the very nature of being in Germany, I couldn't hold down a day job, so I was kind of, in a way, a professional musician by default, and I was also very young. So I didn't make decisions on behalf of this band. I just went, I was told where to be, when to arrive. And if you trace it back a little bit further, when I was at school, I was in a band, and it was just, this is all covers bands. We do all other people's material, There's the Beatles that began to change that, but not initially,
So were you encouraged yet, or was it something that you, like when you were young, did you just feel that was something that you enjoyed, wanting to be musical?
My first memories were of knitting needles and playing the Christmas biscuit tunes.
Yeah.
And then my first...
What, with like sticks and that?
The knitting needles. I pretend they were sticks, and just... I kind of have a vague recollection of that.
Yeah.
But really, and I remember distinctly that my mother's dead now, but when I was about 13 or 14, I was beginning to say, I want a drum kit for Christmas. And I think a lot of people at my age... Their parents, it was always the mother that made executive decisions. The father put the money on the table, and that's about it. It's a bit like Mickey Flanagan, the guy comes home in his string vest and he shuts the door. He thinks he's helping out. But so there I was. Where were we? What we were talking about?
Just going forward, back to like Germany.
I was in this band in. I was still at school. And one of the guys in the sixth form, because I was probably about third year, and this sixth former came, here, Dave, I wasn't picked at that stage. We're having a rehearsal at 4:30 after school. You'll have to come on your bike. I've got the drum kits there from the last gig. Singles used to be released on a Friday, religiously, And one of the guys had gone to get the Beatles single, I Want to Hold Your Hand, and the whole exercise was to get the single from the shop, bike back to the house, put it on the record tape player, learn it, and be the first band to play it that night in what was basically a working men's club, a social club. So there were little things like that I kind of remember very distinctly, but there was a lot of live music in those days. A lot of live music, and there was plenty of opportunities to do it. So, and when you were talking about how to get started, that I did want a drum kit, and my mother was saying, no, you can't have one. But I think it was basically driven by a fear of what neighbours would say in terms of it being noisy, nuisance, and all that stuff. Because our parents' generation were all kind of cowed by authority. The policeman knocked on. The way I kind of describe it is, if a policeman knocked on the door when I was 10 or 11 or something, my parents wouldn't think, what does he want? They would think, what have we done? because they had so much deference, almost painful. But in another element of it, there's a kind of glue that keeps the society together because you behave yourself.
Yeah.
I don't remember there being litter. I remember once we played French cricket. You remember French cricket, Billy?
Yeah.
So they were in the street, in this big, long tenement street, terraced houses, all symmetrically, all mirror image and everything. And we played, and I had the tennis racket, and I whacked the ball straight across the street, straight through the bedroom window. Everybody scarpered.
Yeah.
I remember the sound of tinkling glass, but there's nobody in the street.
Yeah.
5 o'clock.
Police.
No. My dad goes to the front door. You could hear this hushed conversation, not an animated, not an angry, not a aggressive, just a conversation. And my dad was very dry. Come back in. He says, "You owe me 17 and 6." That's 75p in modern parlance. And I said to him, "Oh, what's that for?" "You know what it's for. It's for the window."
Yeah. I think it broke a few.
Okay, I was a bit miffed, but in a way, if you distance yourself away from that thing, that works. Yeah, I broke the window. I should pay for it.
That's it. Yeah.
I had a paper round, so that was my paper round gone that week. And I was a bit miffed, but I never found out who spilled the beans. But it's just one of those things. That's the kind of society or the community that I grew up in, and I think it's a very similar experience.
It's totally changed.
Couldn't get the drum kit. So I joined what's called the Boys Brigade.
Yeah.
They're affiliated to a church, and they would march around the neighbourhood first Sunday in every month. It's like their calling card, trying to recruit new people. And you, again, very kind of reminiscent of those times. You would just spontaneously hear them and just run out on the street, a little kid, and just start marching, mimicking them. You didn't say, I'm going down the street. You just went.
Yeah.
There wasn't that kind of atmosphere of fear, or it wasn't quite so precarious. There weren't so many cars. Everything was more kind of low key. And so I joined the Boys Brigade, and they had everything down really cutely. I joined. I want to be in the band. Oh, everybody wants to be in the band. You've got to march behind.
Yeah.
So otherwise there'd be nobody to march behind. A year marching behind. Tick. Right, I want to be in the band. I want to play drums. No, I don't want to play drums. You got to play the bugle for a year.
Yeah.
So by the third year, I got the little marching drum, the snare drum. There was a very good teacher called Barry Bond. Just gave me a basic rudimental grounding, and I was off.
Yeah.
And because I had this A, enthusiasm for it, and B, an affinity with it, a natural kind of aptitude, although I wouldn't say it was, it was just a piece of cake. I remember frustratingly throwing sticks across the room and getting angry and stuff. But anyway, in short order, as soon as I was playing that drum and I moved up from the kind of guys that slouch around at the back to the lead drummer in very quick time. Not because I superseded the people. This is just natural wastage. It's a youth organisation. People get 16, they're gone. So you're 14, 15. So you're naturally rising to the senior strata of that organisation. I was lead drummer, and then I got a drum kit. My mum bought me a drum kit. And my biggest regret, apart from not really being a fantastic music reader in terms of reading music, I can read it, but I've always regret that I never really knuckled down and cracked that aspect of playing, because it would be really useful now.
Yeah.
The other element that I really regret is not having that kit anymore, because it would just be fantastic to I pay a lot of money to have it, but it's just I'm sure it's just a piece of junk in a tip somewhere, because it wasn't a great drum kit, but to me it was
everything.
It was everything. Yeah. It was everything, and an Ajax drum kit it was, Boozy and Hawks. So that's basically the nuts and bolts of what I did. That whole, the Beatles going to Germany opened a lot of doors for people. The audition, I went down from Leicester with the band in the Ford Thames van, And it was only years later I remembered we drove by this ballroom, Forest Green, I think it was, in South London. We walked in there. It was like a meat market. It's just there's a ballroom in broad daylight, 10 o'clock in the morning. There was like 50 bands in there, and there was just like a table with 3 guys in there, an English guy, 2 German agents, maybe a translator, I don't know. And there was this all around the 4 sides of the ballroom. People were setting up, or people were playing, and after in front of the people that had played, there were people striking, what we call striking, taking the gear out, and as you were going in, there were people coming out. It was just like a conveyor belt of people, bands playing 3 songs and being accepted or saying, no, we don't want you. And then you got an agent, and it wasn't a spontaneous thing. You know, you went home and you exchanged details. No internet. No mobile phones. You know, you just did landline numbers. And about 3 months later, we signed this contract and went to Hamburg. Played Hamburg, Cologne, where we met the Sam the Sham, the Woolly, you know, Spielen Woolly Bully. Lübeck, where Ule was, you know, ripping the place up. And where else? I played in a place called Cuxhaven. It was another port, tiny little club, little seaport up in the Baltic. I think it's the Baltic. You'll have to check, but it's Cuxhaven. And oh dear, ears all over the place. We played about 6 hours, 45 on, 15 off. Yeah. And again, you see, you've got to remember I'm 17, or maybe 18 by this order, but probably in terms of worldly wise attributes, about 14 or 15. I knew nothing. Yeah. So I get down off the bandstand, and it's about 9 o'clock. We played a set. No, it's about 10 o'clock, or maybe even later, 11 o'clock. And I get down. I'm going to go upstairs to my room, and I don't know, do something. I don't know. The proprietor beckons to me. Go and sit at the table over there. And there's this lady there. Of course, was the lady of the night. And but to me, she was just looked like a rough lady. And she bought me a drink, and it's customary.
To drink it.
to drink it, you know, and with a chaser. Yeah. Schnapps. Now I've got very little tolerance in those days of alcohol. So I drink it, and she's happy. We go back and play. Another 45 minutes. I come down, and proprietor sends me again. It's the only thing he's selling because the place is empty, and she's probably looking for a last trick or something. And so on it went until the point where I was not able to play anymore. You know, I could hardly get up the stairs of the bandstand, and I think the band played the last set without me. I was just
blasted.
I tried to play, and I remember that my mate Ray Martinez on guitar says, "You pissed so and so," and I just laughed and fell backwards. But it was like that moment in that Fools and Horses. It never stopped. I just kept going and crashed out on the floor on the stage. That was Cuxhaven. Lübeck was Ule. Cologne was and Hamburg was much more kind of business. You know, it was much busy. Really reminds me of Liverpool in a way. Yeah. Except it was much more extensive kind of port. But that was it really. The Beatles, Hamburg, Boys Brigade getting me started, and the fact that I found myself in Germany, and there I was, kind of by default a professional musician, and it seemed like a good crack to me, really, as they say. But we were there for about 6 months on and off, and then we came back, and we couldn't sustain the same kind of work stuff. Yeah. In Leicester, and or based in Leicester, and there was a natural kind of turnover of groups to go to Germany because they always wanted something different. Yeah. So I ended up signing on unemployment benefit, and basically after about 2 weeks the agency called me in and said, look, we're not a music agency, we cannot keep paying you benefits without you going for jobs. What do you do? I said, I'm a musician. He said, no, we're not finding you work as a musician. We've got a job here, a warehouseman. Go for that interview. Make sure this is signed to prove that you went. So I duly went to this warehouse interview, and lo and behold, I was so casual and relaxed. They gave me the job.
It was like you went in there.
Didn't really want it.
Wasn't
That
even
was
asked.
on a Friday, and I was due to start on a Monday. Well, over the weekend, we did have a gig
Yeah.
in Loughborough, which is a little... Well, you know where the Loughborough University, the sports university, is now. And there I was playing there with the same band that I'd been to Germany with. Come off the bandstand, this long-haired guy. And, of course, I had my hair cut as well to fall in line with all this authority. You know, you do this, you do that. Because we did in those days. Weren't quite so rebellious, you know, until later on in the 60s. And this guy beckoned to me and he said, do you want to join a band? I said, well, I'm in one. He said, but we're professional. I said, are you? He says, yeah. He says, okay. And I joined this band without knowing who they were, what they did. But Monday morning they came and got me, and off I went to... I was, you know, saved from the jaws of...
Unemployment?
No, being a warehouseman.
Yeah.
So off I went to Northampton, which is the next town down the M1. And this group was called the Primitives.
Yeah.
And this is where I start my reincarnation as Pick. They rented a house in Northampton, and there were 2 Daves in the band.
Yeah.
And because I was the second one to join, the last one to join, they said, well, you could have a different name. And because they all had long hair, and I had recently had my hair cut to conform to this
way of life.
Unemployment benefit, you know, there I was, almost not quite short back inside, but I felt very conspicuous. So I used to wear my collar up, scarf, and a hat, and maybe a cravat or something, you know, just to kind of disguise all this bit. He said, "You look like a character out of Pickwick Papers." So they called me Pick. I don't want to be called Pickwick.
Yeah.
So we just shortened it to Pick, and there's very few people now that call me by my name, David. You know, I think my grandson called me when he wants to annoy me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Galileo, and a couple of other people, but that's it really. And we basically played in Birmingham every night in Birmingham, you know, Silver Blades and the Elbow Room and places like that, and big public houses where, you know, there's lots of people, but they like live music, and they like the beer as well, you know, and they support Birmingham or Aston Villa, you know. So that was that, and they were managed by these 3 very charming Jewish guys called Sid and Maya Sippin, and the other guy who was more talkative called Les Jaffa. That's right, as in oranges, he used to say. Yeah. And Sid and Maya ran the local flea pit in Northampton, and it was the days of bingo, tombola. And they always used to have, in those days, to attract the crowds, just be one night a week. Busloads were coming in from all the outlying villages of Northamptonshire. They're bringing busloads because there was a jackpot house where if you got the full house. Thank you, Billy. Within a certain number of numbers being called, you won the jackpot, and if it wasn't claimed, it tied over, and so it was getting enormous. It was getting something like 250 quid, which was big money in those days. It's probably 1,000 quid in today's, even more maybe. So I used to go because I used to go and sit in the manager's office, because we used to use the cinema as a rehearsal place as well when they weren't showing films, and the 2 of them used to sweat buckets because they were in this office and it had a little balcony to go out like a royal box, and they were trying to count how many numbers is that, Sid? You know, I don't know, shut up, I'm trying to count, because they wanted to get over the magic 15 so that the jackpot would be saved for another week, because they were coining it in. They were very funny. They were very funny guys. I mean, they won't be around anymore, but they were funny days. And they shipped us off to Italy, because Birmingham, again, you know, there's a certain point where if you just playing, or to meet you stop playing, you're not getting paid, and you don't have a record deal or anything, so it's just very much live driven. And I think we're almost coming back to that now. Whereas So they shipped us off to Italy, and I ended up living there for 3 years. And like you learnt Thai, io ho imparato un po' di italiano. So, and I think, mirroring that, going back to that Germany kind of episode, Italy is where I grew up.
Yeah.
Because I was away, I was in a band that were not my kind of peers. They were from a different place, so I started to talk slightly differently. And it's that magical thing that when you reinvent yourself, you know, if you're trying to do it growing up and you're surrounded by your friends, they kind of rein you in. Why are you talking like that? Why are you dressing like that?
You can become whoever you want, can't you?
Come back to us. You know, you're one of us. Don't get fancy ideas, you know. So there I was in Italy, and I discovered garlic. I didn't know what garlic was, you know. Beautiful food, sunshine, girls, you know, and playing and learning a language which brought me out of myself. I remember coming back unannounced to Leicester's to a quick flying visit to see my parents, and I thought I would impress my dad when he opened the door. I'd give him the kiss on two cheeks, the greeting. You know. Boy, did he recoil in horror. He thought that something had gone awfully wrong with my
his sexuality.
My sexuality. But that was so funny. It's so funny that we are so reserved like that. Yeah. And there I was, like picking hair off, you know, touching other guys without it mean anything other than just a sort of concern for, you know, a kind of warmth of feeling, you know. And I still have friends in Italy today, to this day, and I would almost go to Italy for the slightest reason, just to kind of soak it all up again. I went there about 2 years ago before lockdown. Went to Rome. I lived in Rome 3 years. Passed my test there. That was a fiasco. I've never seen anything. This is back in 1967. They were doing a practical test then as well. Before you drove the car, you had to do an exam, an oral exam in front of a guy. So I was having to speak Italian. And if you passed that, you were allowed to go out onto the streets in this what was no more than a cavalcade with about 8 cars, and the front car would be the examiner. So there you would be chasing them around the streets of Rome, trying to be the next car to get him to sit. Once he vacates the car up front, you're trying to usher him into your car so that you can have your bit of the test. And so I passed my test there, and I drove up and down the motorways endlessly. And I've discovered slimming pills to keep me awake, because on Sunday nights...
Like speed, isn't it, really?
On Sunday nights, we would be somewhere like Milan.
Yeah.
In the winter, we'd play a Friday night, hotel, drive. Saturday, hotel, drive. Sunday, drive to a place, do a matinee. And in the same place, we would have a meal, and then we would do the evening performance, pack the gear up. Or by that time, I think somebody else was packing the gear up for us, and we would drive a car. And I was the only one that could drive. So I'm driving from Milan to Rome at about 11 o'clock at night. Now in Italy, on a Sunday, all the big lorries are banned until midnight. So I would try and get as many miles as possible down the motorway from 11 till midnight before all the lorries came out like ants out of a hole, you know, and just completely slowed you up. And I was also, you know, wide awake on these slimming pills, and the other guys were asleep, and I was nudging them and trying to make conversation, and I started to hallucinate. I remember my dad used to read me the Reverend W. Awdry train books, you know, Thomas the Tank Engine. There's a tract in Italy coming down from Bologna to Florence. It's not the Alps, but it's the mountain. It's hills and mountains, and they've got all these tunnels that cut right through, and no speed limit. So you're doing 100 miles, 160k, 100 miles an hour. Come round the corner, and there was a wall across the entrance of the tunnel, which was straight out of a story of the Thomas Tank. And of course, as soon as you put your brakes on it, it's an hallucination. You disappear. And I thought, it's about time we got a driver. But no, I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I was there for 3 years. And then I came back to London because there were all these British bands coming over to Italy for the summer seasons, you know, bit of sunshine, decent gig, you know. And I played in a place called Rimini, which is a bit like Skegness.
Yeah.
Little place called the Back Cavern, heaving, just lots of holidaymakers, young people having a good time. Used to come, place would be open 8 until 2. And we played with another group called the Doc Thomas Group, and they were just out from London. We made great friends with them. And I went, shortly after that, I got fed up with being, the band was called Primitives in Italy. I decided to go back to London because I'd heard all these stories about Hendrix and stuff. It just wasn't what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I went to see this Doc Thomas Group, and they had become Mott the Hoople. So I was doing auditions, and there were 100 drummers turning up, and I was beginning to lose my nerve a bit, thinking, oh, I wish I was in Italy, knowing what was happening, you know. But thankfully, I was with them, and the Melody Maker used to be full of adverts. Drummer wanted for, you know, whatever. And they recognised an advert which I would never have responded to. They recognised the number as being a studio in Wales, because they were from Hereford. The studio was in Monmouth. Very close. They're all on the what they call the Wye Valley. Beautiful river, the River Wye. If you're a fisherman, it's the best place to fish. They recognised this number, and I just went down there, phoned and went down there. And lo and behold, it was another band. It was a band all from Leicester, and I was from Leicester. So the whole thing kind of dovetailed nicely. Studio was in its embryonic period, and that was Rockfield Studios, where there was a great documentary on that, the studio on the farm, on BBC about a year ago, 2 years ago. I think it still might be on the BBC website, and you forget how many people recorded there. Queen, Oasis, PJ Del Shannon, Dave Edmunds, Andy Farrell, Amen Corner, just a load of people. I'm not a great kind of chronicler of stuff, but I know there's loads of people, Lightning Seeds or whatever.
Yeah, so it's quite popular with big bands.
I think what's popular about it was you lived in.
Yeah.
So, and you had what's called a lockout. You know, most studios in London, you would hire it for 6 hours or 3 hours or something. Yeah. Once you go into a place like Rockfield in the country, you're staying there, so you don't want to break your gear down every night. You just set the gear up and you just leave it there, and it's there 7/24. Yeah. You know, those days are probably gone now, but people, it comes out in the film that, you know, you do get a different kind of vibe from living somewhere and living with your mate, and it's just that little bit relaxed, sleeping in the same bed every night, looking at the stars, you know, a bit crazy. Oh, what's that band called? Not The Cure. They had a big hit called Yellow.
Oh, Coldplay.
Yes, they recorded there. Yeah. They were on their last chance, apparently. The record said, we need a hit. And he had a break from the studio in a farm, and he looked up and saw all the stars. Yeah. And that was the germ of the idea of Yellow. You know, it's a different vibe when you're living together, you know, eating together. Not travelling is a big thing as well. And I'd kind of played in this band for about 2 or 3 years. That seemed to be the natural shelf life. We had an album out in the progressive rock days. Yeah. That was around the time of Free and King Crimson, Not Bad Company, a place called Bullet, Arthur Brown. Arthur Brown was there as well. And for about 2 years after the demise of the group called Spring, I was the kind of session drummer at the studio, and it suited me down to the ground because I rented a cottage, started baking bread, grew a beard, you know, did yoga and stuff, and I was almost on the verge of probably going to India and studying tabla or something. You know, I was doing
wearing able flip-flops and everything, just going the whole goal.
Yeah, but it wasn't so taboo in those days. You know, baking bread and. Had a dog and had a bedroom.
Quite eccentric now, isn't it? You'd be classed as, you know, back then or something.
I think they thought it was eccentric then. You know, I mean, well, what turned it for me? I did a session for Mick Jagger's brother, Chris Jagger,
Yeah.
on an album called The Ventriloquist Dummy. And I was going through a sort of quasi-Zen phase. I wasn't smoking, I wasn't drinking, I was baking bread, I was vegetarian, and had a big beard. Well, I could have been in a band, the band. And there was something about playing with this band, it was kind of high-octane band, really. The drummer had got fed up and gone home or something.
Yeah.
And it was an international band with a couple of Canadians, American, English guys, Scottish guys. And I enjoyed it so much. And in those days, still pubs shut at 11, so they would want to go to the pub around about 10 o'clock and we'd have lock-ins. They'd shut the curtains in this place called Robin Hood in the main street of Monmouth and we'd just take the instruments and play. And the landlord loved it. And we'd get to about 11 o'clock and all of a sudden there was 20, 25 pints of Guinness all lined up on the bar, so there was no money changing hands and the door was locked and we just used to play. And, just like Lord Buckley says, that curiosity got the better of me and I took a slash, tasted mighty good, and all of a sudden I could see neon lights lighting up. It was a great life for coming, I was back on the tipple, and the Zen went out the window. And after that, I went up to London and became a kind of, I read it the other day, I was rather massaged my ego very well. I was apparently the go-to guy in the folk rock era when drums were starting to be introduced into folk music, because it's a bit taboo. It's just, I think it would have been after Dylan's Judas episode where he had the band that came over and played at Manchester Free Trade Doors, around about maybe a little bit later than that. So drums were beginning to feature in folk music, where a few years before it was sacrilege or something, So I was playing I played for a guy called Ralph McTell who had Streets of London, big hit for him, but I didn't play on that. I played on one of his albums. I played with a guy called Bert Jansch, who I have died recently, well, a few years ago now. I really enjoyed that because he's a big iconic figure in the folk world, and part of that whole thing was meeting a guy called Rod Clements, who was in Lindisfarne. But Lindisfarne weren't a functioning band at that time, and he let me use one of his rooms as a base to try and get my feet under the table in London. And I moved and then via him I met one of his colleagues in Lindisfarne, Simon Cow, who had a big house in Stamford Hill. And it was becoming very difficult for me as a functioning drummer in London to rent anything, rent a room. It's like going back to the early days of being Irish or black or something. They didn't want you, so you had to lie through your teeth to get a room. But at the same time, you would have to kind of figure out, well, what's the point in getting this room, because they're going to see the drums. So I would ask questions like, well, what are the neighbours like? So, well, the woman downstairs is deaf. That would be for me a big tick.
You'd have to be.
Or the next door, they're starting a new family. Oh no, I don't think I'd go for this place. So Simon solved that by being a musician, and I rented a room there. Lynn's from Newcastle. So one day, this guy knocks on the door, another Geordie, a guy called Mark Knopfler, and he knows that Simon's got a reel-to-reel tape deck, 2-track tape deck called a Revox. That was about as good as it got in those days. This is before multi-tracks, just 2 tracks. And he asked if he could use that. Simon did the engineering. I had some hand drums and shakers and tambourines and whatever I had. So, I'll put some of that. And he said, yeah, please, that'd be nice. So we had a good time that afternoon. I can't remember anything about the content of the recording, but off he went, and that was just something you did.
Yeah. And
then at some arbitrary time later, he knocked on the door again and said, oh, remember me? I said, yeah, you were the guy that, yeah. He said, I'm forming a band. Would you play the drums in it? And we were off and running, And that was how Dire Straits came to me, you know.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of so it wasn't even formed as a band when you started. It was like
No, there was just I think there was John and Mark's brother David were renting a little tenement ground floor flat in Deptford.
yeah.
This and it was near one of the campuses, so there were lots of kind of student types renting property. They weren't the best of properties, but there was a great atmosphere there, you know. And Mark was still teaching, I believe, in Loughton, which is out on the M25 periphery, isn't it? No, that's Peripatique. That's Paris. What do they call it? Orbital. And we would go down there and just play, like a hobby almost. But I think, you know, slowly we realised that, you know, there were some songs, and we started doing gigs. I think we were called the Cafe Races for a while.
Yeah, before the name changed.
But then it was changed to Dire Straits. But the big real push was that John had a half share in a record shop. Remember those folks' record shops? And
not existent now, are they?
And it was called Honky Tonk Records in Kentish Town or Camden, I'm not sure. Maybe Chalk Farm, Camden, one of those, in that area. And the store took its name from a radio show on London Broadcasting Radio, which was like the BBC local radio. There was a guy called Charlie Gillette. He's dead now. He's a DJ stroke rock and roll chronicler. He's much respected in the business, and John had this idea because he had a radio show to get his opinion of the tape that we made. We made a demo tape basically of 4 songs. I think they were Sultans, Down to the Waterline, Wild West End, and one other which I can't remember. But somebody will have it somewhere as a bootleg or somewhere. But the 4 songs. Now, Charlie's quite cute because this is a tip for anybody who's, you know, if you're asked to listen to a piece of music and they're looking for an opinion, do not listen to it while they're there, because it's very awkward. If it's good, it's great, but sometimes it can be quite mediocre or something, and you feel compelled to say something. And whereas when you're on your own, you can kind of compose your thoughts and think, yeah, it's quite good that or something, but I think you need to do this and to, you know. So you can keep your distance, you know. But so Charlie said, well, I will listen to the lads, but I won't listen to it while you're here, so I'll let you know. And lo and behold, we didn't know, but he actually enjoyed the tape so much that he put one of the tracks played it on the radio. And then there was a funny response. There was a lot of people thought we were American.
Yeah.
There was 2 or 3 phone calls, one from an A&R guy, artist and recording liaison. It's a talent spotter, really, a guy or girl for that matter, can go around in those days spotting, because there was bigger budgets, trying to find new acts to potentially sign to the label. With him, there was a lawyer and something else, and out of this like little mini event, it was almost like a snowball formed, and it began to roll down the hill and build and build and build, and all of a sudden there were more people from the music business coming to our gigs, other people as well, that just normal punters, but there were other people and introducing themselves, and Richard Branston started, you know, appearing on the scene and things, and that all culminated in us signing to Philips and Phonogram.
How did that feel? After the years of like traveling and
it's great, but I mean, it's just another way of kind of keeping in the game, if you like, you know, getting another it's like a footballer, you know, getting another contract. Okay, I've got more time. But the thing that really kicked it into the stratosphere was the record was recorded and duly released, and we had a holiday, and I just went back to the Wye Valley where I'd been at the studios. I just loved it down there, and I rented a cottage for about 4 weeks, and there was no phone, and somehow somebody got a message to me, because there were no mobile phones, but I think
A pigeon.
No, well, it wasn't quite that, but the landlord or something. I don't know. You know. Anyway, I went down to this phone box, a red phone box, and phoned up David, and he said, "We've got a gold record in Holland. You got to come back. We're going over there to do television and things."
Wow.
And that really started to put it on a kind of different
Career level, then, isn't it?
Level, yeah. And it's almost like liftoff.
Yeah.
You know, and then you basically have to ride it for all you're worth. Really, it's like surfing. You know, once you're on the wave,
You've got to keep riding it.
Ride it. I'm sure there are. You know, you've had similar
it's
experiences.
See, the first 4 albums were brilliant. Sultans of Swing, Romeo and Juliet. You know, that must have been like incredible just to be a part of that.
Yeah. You don't really take stock of it at the time. You're much more involved in it in a way. You know, I was always concerned about getting a good drum sound.
Yeah.
And trying to get a good part. So you never stand away from it. You know? I mean, it took me a long time to hear, say, the first album, how other people would hear it.
Yeah.
Because once you've been involved in the process of creating it or making it or painting it or whatever, you
I know exactly what you mean.
You
Yeah,
tend to focus on the wrong things.
Yeah.
I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd done this. Oh, that's that mistake.
Always striving to be better.
Always striving to be better, and being probably too preoccupied with yourself. You know,
very critical of your own.
Yeah.
So
it took a while for me to stand back and think, actually, that's got a wonderful atmosphere about it. It was almost like that sepia black and white photograph that you think it's just a flat piece of paper, but you see a lot of atmosphere in it, there's a lot of dialogue there, and it withstands scrutiny. You know, there's something very special about it. Of course, you know what you're dealing with is that on our first album is anybody's first album really. When it's successful, you're what we might say cherry picking songs from all your writing history. So you can afford to be very selective, and the problem comes when you've selected the 10, 11 best songs that you've ever, in your estimation of, you know, the best songs you've written. You then have to find, all of a sudden, they want another album. Yeah. So that's you go to the cupboard, there's nothing in there. You know, and you've got to write them. And so that was pretty tough for Mark, you know, to do that. But, you know, it was okay. But to try and answer your question, Billy, what was it like? It really was like trying to stay on a wave. And I mean, I think some of them struggled with it because the venues were getting bigger. Yeah. And I was quite used to the idea of you have a sound check where you check all the lines and the sounds and things in the empty room before the people come in. Yeah. And I was quite used to the idea, well,
quite intimate.
That sounded good, but it's not going to sound like that tonight when the people come in. Yeah. And David would panic, you know, because it wouldn't sound as good as the record, but you just have to cut, or even just on a pure acoustic level, you think, well, I can't hear the bass tonight, but I'm not going to let that bug me. Whereas other people would get really down about it, you know, and so that element of it wasn't so much fun because you didn't feel like the team was playing as well as it could play. You know, to use the footballing analogy, you know, you got people that stand out, but you know, so
do you think being a drummer was more like? Do you think like, I don't know? People focus on the singers, don't they? And the guitarists and all that, the lead. So did you ever feel that you were like not playing a bigger role in the bands? Any bands, if you were ever in there? That's something that you kind of, would that affect you as well? You know what I mean?
Well, I tried to be more kind of showy in a way, you know. If live, you really conduct things. You know, you determine the tempo, you determine the intensity, you determine the volume. If they trust you, if the other guys trust you, and that's where you start to get a bit of kind of friction because they're so preoccupied with what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, and Mark's just got it all on his plate. You know, he's doing that Matt Lucas thing. You know, writing the theme tune, singing the theme tune, playing the solo on the theme tune.
Yeah.
So the only time he gets any time to kind of let it out is when the solo comes. He turns around to me and he said, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
You know, and I've got David and John who are, I mean, at some gigs they would be saying, one would say it's too slow, one would say it's too fast. I said, I don't care, it's going like this. It's too late now. This is the way it's going. So that's all the kind of teething problems you get when you don't have, and David and John didn't have much experience.
Yeah.
You know, I think it was David's first band. I mean, the guy doesn't know how.
And like you've been involved in a few bands prior to getting involved in that as well, weren't you?
But I know a funny story. We were doing this, going back to that, the Rockfield days in Monmouth, where I played in that band from Leicester when I travelled from London, and Mott the Hoople had recognised the advert, the advert for the drummer. We ended up making an album called Spring, which has become a collector's item because it's only in vinyl, and I've seen some of them change hands for 50 quid in good nick. You know, I don't. I mean, we were. I think it's because we used them. It's not necessarily because of me. It's because we used a Mellotron. We were one of the first bands to use a Mellotron along with the Moody Blues. We didn't have such a high profile as the Moody Blues, and the Beatles were using the Mellotron as well. A lot of people don't know about it, but it's kind of been superseded in a way now by the, synthesizers. But at that time, it was as good as it got, the Mellotron. So this guy walks into a dressing room in this club in America, and Mark tries to go and sign it, and he just pushes him aside. You know, it's just a sweet moment. He said, "No, I don't want you." I said, "I want him," you know, because I played on it. Yeah. See this, Mark? Not really, not at the time.
It must have crushed his ego.
Yeah, I think it did. You know, so all that's going on, you know, all the time. But you know, I'd probably do it all again, and I'd probably leave at the same juncture as well, you know, because I want to do something else, you know.
Yeah, brilliant.
You do, I mean, there are other elements of it that start to kind of constrain you. You know, I remember a couple of incidents, really, where I walked into a sound check one day on this tour when we were starting to do big rigs with lights and a big PA and probably 3, 4, 5, 6,000 seater stadiums in halls, whatever. And this lighting guy jumps on me. "Oh, pick. I've put this spot up tonight. You twiddled your stick in a song last night. When was it?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. Just did it because I felt like it, you know." "Ah, but you see, you've got to do it again because I've got this spot and I need to know when it is." "Well, it's in that song that where it just comes down on a crack. And you got to do it tonight." I said, "Okay, I'll do it for you, Chas." That was great. But that's in then. Yeah. Every night. You got to do it every night. Yeah. After that. So it's all choreographed. And then somebody else will say, "Well, when you did that thing, I like that, so you got to do that." So all of a sudden, you're like being choreographed.
Yeah.
And
so it's not natural then, is it?
Well,
it's kind of repetitive.
You start to get into a strange area where you've got to really
rehearse the same thing.
Make an effort to make a show. Otherwise, I mean, to
true,
me, live, playing live is not faithfully reproducing the album. It's turning it into a spectacle and whatever you can do without compromising the music. But there's no way you can make it sound in a big hall as intimate as some of those records are. But you just have to go with it. You know, some nights the sound is good, sometimes it's warm and malleable like a piece of clay. It's like baking bread. Sometimes when you get to the dough side, all of a sudden it just becomes alive and you can manipulate it and work with it. And other nights it's just a piece of wood, and it doesn't matter what you do. But when you're on those nights, you have to smile and do it. I remember one night we played in Southampton at the Civic Hall or something, and we sent all our best equipment on ahead to Germany on the road because we had to do a big TV network show, and this had all been organised. So I was using my an old kit and organised it with the roadie to make sure it was there. Well, half of it wasn't there, so it was. A taxi was sent up to London to some storage place, and it was unearthed, and down it came, and it was put on stage just about 2 minutes before the curtains went up, and it sounded like it didn't sound good. But there you are. I'm sure it sounded better
Then have a knot
in the room than what it was sounding to me.
Yeah.
But for 2 hours, I thought this is absolute shite. I'll wait till I get off stage. I've got to give you a piece of my mind. Oh, I've twiddled my stick here, and all that. And then we got to the last song, and I knew it was the last song because we only did 2 encores, so we had no more songs to play. So it came to the end and the big finale, and I just thought, I'll do a Keith Moon. So I jumped da 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 ba da bum bum, and I just kicked all the stuff off the stand, and then walked off because there was nothing else to do. And I was first in the dressing room for a while, and for once, and I thought, oh dear, that wasn't very professional at all, And I waited for the door to come open, and they charged in. I thought it was going to get right hauled over the coals. That was great. Can you do it again tomorrow night? Yeah. No, I don't want to do it tomorrow night. I just did it spontaneously because, the drums sound all right. Well, it sounded all right to you. Good, yeah, because I got on with it.
Yeah.
But, so there's all that element as well, feeding into your kind of experience of the whole thing. And then there's another element where you're just playing with the same people all the time.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you're no longer a Manchester City or a Liverpool on the attack. You're more like you're becoming more like Watford, something. You're trying to have your victories on the basis of set pieces.
Yeah.
When we get a corner, when we get you play this and I'll play that, and then he does this and then you do that, and then you twiddle your stick, and that becomes what you are. And the only time you get any chance to be creative is when you're recording new material.
Yeah.
But you're playing with the same people,
the same thing, the same time.
Same thing, and in the end, it's the bank manager wants you to stay. But it's killing you, because you just feel there's a certain aspect of it where you're just almost like on an automatic pilot.
Yeah.
It's like out of body experiences where did I just play that last bit?
Like the Duracell bunny.
Yeah. I was somewhere here just looking, this is where you twiddle your sticks, this is where you jump up, and this is where he says, and you almost that comic thing where you're mimicking
the night before.
Or you're mimicking an introduction because you know exactly how it's nuanced, and I sympathize with people because it's not easy to front something when you're responsible to say something, to be the kind of conduit between you and the audience. Otherwise, you're just not you're not going to really connect with the crowd. But I must say that I became more gracious in probably in Dire Straits because you have to deal with so many people coming in afterwards, and you begin to realise that people don't offer you compliments if they don't enjoy it. And what you find is it's against like football. You over the piece, you play to a mean average, and the only thing that really gets you off is when that night when everything clicks, the sound is great, you can hear everybody else, you feel like it's all kind of kicking off, and that you want that every night, and it never happens like that kind of
chasing Eldorado then, aren't you? It's like you're just chasing Eldorado. It's like you're looking for that.
Well, it's like there's a wonderful story about Laurence Olivier. When he was alive, he was doing some Shakespearean run in the Old Vic or somewhere in London, and there was one particular evening when it was obviously really going places. There was a buzz in the cast. People people were not going to their dressing rooms when they weren't on. They were all in the all in the wings, transfixed and completely enveloped in his performance. And so it went on all the way. That classic surfing, and then it got to the curtain calls, and they had loads and loads of curtain calls, and Larry was very gracious, bowing and smiling and soaking up the applause. And then when it came to the final curtain call, he just stomped off in a kind of like a hissy fit and slammed his dressing room door, and the rest of the cast were aghast. Oh, as somebody said. So they procured the junior boy, the gaffer, whatever they called, and go and knock on the door, find out what's wrong. So this boy's timid little boy, and he goes to the dressing room. It's near the stage because he's number one dressing room, and you can hear this crashing about, and he's going, Mr. Olivier. He says, yes. He says, everything all right? He says, no, not. He says, well, but you were wonderful today. I really thought you were wonderful. Yes, I know, but I don't effing know why. So he was like, he knew he couldn't reproduce it because he hadn't, although it was, he was in the moment. Once the moment's finished, he couldn't
reproduce the fit. Yeah,
he just couldn't work out what those elements were that went to that performance. And sometimes it's like that.
Yeah.
But you have to be gracious. People comment, that was great, and sometimes we were less than gracious. We just wanted it to be that high every night, and it wasn't. But
perfection.
It didn't mean to say if it wasn't there, it was rubbish. It just meant it was much more kind of a mean average sort of thing. And so.
So what going forward after the band and stuff like that? What did you? What did it just sort of like? You just sort of kind of like think, well, that's it. I'm going to move on because it wasn't for you. And
what did I do? I did a puppet show with my wife to get her an equity card. Quite bizarre, really.
Yeah.
And I did some teaching.
Yeah.
I taught in a school for a couple of years on drums one-on-one, which taught me a lot about myself and my standard of playing, because that taught me a lot. And it was funny because there was one fella that it was a comprehensive school in North London, probably built in the late 50s. All these glass separate buildings, which separate faculty, a music faculty, a science block. So these kids, when they came to the music block to have their drum lesson, they were walking over grass, lawns and things. And this one kid, I just couldn't make any connection with him. I couldn't. I think 2 terms we tried to get him to play. He could play one thing, one rhythm, but every time I tried to subtly change it, it just came out the same every time. And it was the last. It was the last week before the Easter break, and I said to him, look, Jimmy, I've got a great idea this week. So we're really going to crack it this week. You do the top bit because you're good at that, and I'm going to get down there and you just let your foot relax, and I'm going to push it. And maybe when you're doing, you'll hear, and not what you're doing. So I got down there and said, right, let's go. And as I grabbed his foot, there was this awful kind of goo. And I knew immediately what it was because I've kept dogs. It was a dog turd. And I looked up at it. It was like a comical moment, like a Norman Wisdom moment. And I looked at this dog do on my hand. I said, Jimmy, he says, doesn't that sum up our relationship? It's Easter. I want you to think about in the break whether you really want to come back for more, because I don't know what to do anymore. I surrender. I'm going to wash my hands now. So you're a good lad, but I don't think the drums are for you. So I've done lots of different things, you know, which, but of course they're not so high profile.
Yeah.
So, but
What are you doing with yourself these days then? What's
well, I just done a gig. We just did a gig on YouTube, but we did it at the in Hope Street.
Oh yeah, that's where I kind of started my
Opposite Everyman.
Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
Masonic Hall? The Masonic, I don't know what they call it.
yeah. I know what it is. I know exactly where it is. Yeah.
And that was quite, it was like slightly fractious because it was in lockdown. Although we played by the rules and kept all separate. It was always, I do have concerns about where music is going.
Yeah.
Probably the last 10 years. It just seems people don't really kind of relate to buying music. They think it's free. And what I really miss now is seeing young people. I say young people, I mean just very broadly, you know, from 15 to 30, 35, whatever. I used to love seeing them walking along the street with an album.
Yeah.
And they wanted, and it was always wasn't in a bag, it was a plastic bag. So people, they wanted you to see what they were into, because it was almost like a badge. And the only time I see that now in a similar kind of way is kids with skateboards. I look at them, he's cool, she's cool.
Yeah.
She's got an activity that she's into, which is not based on
Stuff.
Game Boy and the phone. And see, the phone, I haven't got a problem with phones, but the sound is so tinny, you know. When people, we used to take great care with recordings and try to make it as much as a musical experience. We used to make it a sonic experience as well. Like, you know, it doesn't seem to be such a priority these days. And it's just a different world. So you come back to where we started, where I'm really glad that I was born when I was born as a baby boomer, and I just fell into these situations rather than went looking for them. Because I don't think a green Midland boy from Leicester would have been able to
make it in this day and age.
I don't know about today. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't have been a drummer, would I?
Yeah.
Might have been a keyboard player.
You might have been a YouTuber.
do jingles or something, you know. But there's all sorts. I mean, I played with a girl called Charlie Dore. Charlie Dore's Back Pocket. She had a hit around about the time I was playing with. I didn't play on it, but it was a hit called Pilot of the Airwaves. And she was trying. You know, I was in a band, Back Pocket. Finest derriere in country music she had. It was always a pleasure to play behind her. And she was a sassy girl too, but she did the she supplemented her money by getting jingles. And she got the Heinz jingle. We've made it, we passed the Heinz. She did that. Yeah. So she tells the story where she's in this room, and sometimes when you do a jingles, you look through the window where the control room is, and there are lots of people there that it's from the Heinz, somebody who really wanted to be a musician that can come, and the budget manager, the advertising manager, the managing director, because they're excited by this, you know, this whole new surroundings, and it's a bit of a league for them. So she's done it. We've made it, we passed the Heinz test, we're tasty, we're wholesome, we're certainly the best. This is the kind of classical thing. And then she just stands there in the dark and she sees these heads. And then there's a click and the intercom, Charlie, yes? He says, that was great. Can you do it again? Yes, you didn't like it? He said, no, we want you to sound more like a tomato.
How do you sound like a tomato?
No, you see, this is the fundamental thing, you know. Charlie would say, of course, because she needed the money. She wasn't going to say,
I'll sound like anything
for a bit
of money.
She was, I'll sound like a tomato. just give me the bloody money. I need it. You know. And then there's a great one. My great friend Bill Gautier was a sound engineer par excellence. He used to have a studio, Megmasters in London. He was doing a jingle, and they were doing what's called a rap when they finish it. And he said, why are you in a hurry tonight, Bill? One of the guys who was working with him from the company. He said, I've got a ticket to see David Sanborn, the great saxophone. He said, is David Sanborn in town? He said, yeah. He said, you think you come and play on this jingle? He says, well, you've got Raphael Ravenscroft, the guy that been on Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street. Yeah, but David Sanborn, I'm a big fan of David Sanborn. You think I pay him? He said, well, if you want to. Oh, yeah, and Bill's already thinking, another day, another $1. I'll speak to him. He says, will you come to the studio tomorrow before you do the gig? All you need to do is bring your horn. And the track's all down. I said, well, what is it? He said, the guy just loves you, so I'm sure,
you get it,
easy money, so you can charge triple scale, whatever you want, So there he goes in, David Sanborn, and he plays similar, not Heinz Tomatoes, but something similar, and it's the same thing. That he stops in the control room. That's great, David. Can you do it again? And David said, well, didn't you like it? Oh, it was great, but just can you do it again? He said, well, do you want me to do it differently or something? I said, no, just play it again. He says, well, why? Oh, it might be better. Okay. So he does it again, and then the same thing. Third time. So he says, hang on a minute. And Bill, my engineer mate, said, hang on a minute, we're running out of tracks. He said, we'll keep Raphael Ravenscroft track because that's the guide, okay? We haven't got any more tracks. And David said, look, don't worry about it. Just wipe all my tracks out and I'll do a killer one. That's what you want, isn't it? I think I know what you want. He said, okay, great. And they're all going, great. So it's just a thing, said David. So what's that? He said, I need a bit more atmosphere. He says, can you turn the lights down? You got it?
Yeah.
And the lights are going down, no, lower. Until it's completely black. He said, right. He said, that's good. Play the tape. And while it's in the darkness, he just puts his saxophone away and just
gets off.
Buggers off. And the difference is between him and Charlie, he's got money in the bank, and Charlie didn't. So
brilliant.
Music is a funny business, It's a paymaster. It's a wonderful, and sometimes it's just when I was in Hamburg, crying my eyes out. First time I've been, away from Leicester, little provincial Leicester. It's just so. I felt so lonely. I felt so long with foreign language and hungry. In fact, one of the funny stories about that was that we used to, when we were travelling around and eating, the guy around the band, the bass player, Watkins, his name, he walked around with a kind of gabardine mac on with a HP bottle of sauce in, and he would never share it with anybody. And every time he ate, he had egg and chip, double egg and chips. Weisspiegelei mit Pommes frites, bitte. And we would all jostle to sit next to him. He would get the sauce out, put the bottle back in his pocket, and set to his thing, chips in the yolk, sauce, like that. When the yolk was gone, he lost all interest in his little banquet, and that's what we were all after, like vultures, because we were all starving. So he finished what and we'd all descend on these chips and the whites.
Sounds
so funny.
Right, so we're coming to the end of our podcast. I always say this, any pearls of wisdom, any guidance or what would you say to a young drummer or a young musician coming through the doors these days?
I would say,
any advice?
Get yourself really familiar with metronome, digital one, especially one that is got rather than a click, it's also got a click and it's got a visual screen that mimics the old metronome, because that fills the time. Learn to read music, because it's going to be so important, because rehearsal time now is so expensive. Do that. And on YouTube, there are people that will show you all the rudiments that you need to know. There's a guy called Jim Chapin. You can don't be seduced by all the kind of technical wizards, because you need to walk before you can run. But it's all there on YouTube now. And but I would say that get a metronome, learn how to hold the sticks. get yourself acquainted with a guy called Sanford Muller, who's he's dead now, but guy that invented a technique for playing, which is all about based around. He studied the Civil War drummers who could play with broomsticks on pigskins and for hours and hours at great volume, and he worked out how they do it. It's not a physical. It's not like boxing where you're not punching the skin. You're trying to get the stick to work for you, and and you need to relax. You must always relax. If you get tense. Also, if you've got a dog and you're right-handed, throw the ball with your left hand. Work out why. Work out why there isn't so much fluency with your weaker hand, because that will all feed into the way you play.
Brilliant, brilliant. And with that, thank you. Thanks for your time, Pick.